He is Peter Weinberg. He is the partner and co-founder of Perella Weinberg Partners. He is also the former CEO of Goldman Sachs International. You were on the front lines as well a couple of years ago. In fact, it was 3 years ago to this day that Lehman Brothers collapsed. What lessons can be learned as we are here 3 years later?
Well, I think there are many factors that are very different today versus 3 years ago. But one thing is similar, and we share with that time, which is there's a lot of fear in the marketplace. I think with respect to the West, my own feeling is that I feel a little bit better about the U.S. than Europe. And what I do often is use the health of the financial system as an indicator to make that judgment. And in the United States right now, the banks are, I don't think there's a lot of growth right now that people are forecasting at all, but I think they're on balance a little bit healthier, certainly than they were when they entered the crisis last time. They issued a lot of equity in the spring of '09. They took their lumps with respect to recognizing losses on asset values that had declined. And there are lots of issues. There are fiscal issues. There are mortgage liability issues. But the U.S. feels to me to be a little bit stronger than Europe.
What do you see as the most plausible worst-case scenario, given the fact that we have serious issues cropping up with the European banks? They have not had their day of reckoning, have they?
They really haven't quite as much, although I think we're seeing a reaction to that right now. I mean, if you look at the ratings decisions that were made on some of the French banks, and you look at what the French banks are now doing, I think that's happening right now. I think assets are being sold, balance sheets are being shored up, and I think that's their reaction right now, which I think is very important to do.
What are you doing here in China? You run a boutique investment bank. The big players here dominate. We have, of course, Goldman, your former company, JP Morgan, CIC, the domestic player. What role can you play as a smaller player?
Well, we're just 5 years old. We just celebrated our 5th anniversary, and we have two businesses. We have an asset management business, and we have an advisory business. And we work with large institutions and families and corporate clients around the world, and you really can't be in that business today without being in China. We just opened up our office here last week. On the advisory side, we're mostly focused on cross-border M&A, and I think the proposition that we bring to clients here is the same to what we bring elsewhere around the world, which is independence, conflict-free advice. And we're filled with people who have a tremendous amount of experience, particularly on the advisory side in the advisory area.
How do you see China fitting into the mix, though, for you in the next 5 years or so? Can you wedge in to this type of business here? I know I was just speaking with Martin Sorrell. He is of the WPP group, different business than yours, but he says this is really his delta. China is going to play such a significant, bigger role given the downturns in the Europe zone and in the U.S. Yeah,
I mean, we feel that there's an enormous interest in China to put capital to work outside of China, and we feel there's an enormous need outside of China to put capital in. And so there's an enormous amount of activity, and through our network and our contacts and our expertise, we plan to get in the middle of that.
So you see, obviously, M&A activity from Chinese corporations overseas. You can play a role there.
We do.
Yeah.
We think that's an important trend going on right now, and it's a very complicated thing. I mean, when you're doing a merger between a company in Ohio and Michigan, it's a little bit different than when you're doing it between a company in China and a company somewhere else around the world, whether they're an investor or an actual company.
All right. Hiring a lot here?
We're growing our business. We just opened our office here. We're very excited about that, and we're starting small, but we're sticking to our knitting. I mean, we have our asset management business, and we talk to investors to put capital in that business, and we have our advisory business where we work with corporate clients around the world.